The Denver International Airport on a Tuesday morning smelled like coffee, jet fuel, and the particular kind of anxiety that only comes when thousands of strangers are rushing in every direction at once. Michael Chen stood near Gate B47, his weathered Timberland boots planted firmly on the polished tile floor. He'd been coming to this airport every other Wednesday for 3 years now. He knew the rhythm. He knew which coffee shops had the decent espresso. He knew which security lines moved fastest. But what he didn't know was that this particular Tuesday morning would shatter the delicate balance he'd worked so hard to build. Michael was a single father, not by choice, but by circumstance. His ex-wife Sarah had left when their son Lucas was 18 months old. She'd left him a note on the kitchen counter, a check that bounced 2 weeks later, and a custody arrangement that she'd rarely honored since. Now Lucas was 8 years old, and every other Wednesday morning, Michael brought him to this airport to meet his mother. She would pick up Lucas, they'd spend the afternoon together, and then Michael would return at 6 o'clock to collect his son. Those were the rules. Those were the boundaries Michael had learned to accept. It wasn't ideal, it was what he had. Michael's hands were the hands of a man who worked with tools. He was a carpenter, a good one, the kind who could frame a house or finish cabinets with equal precision. His calluses told stories, 10-hour days and weekend side jobs. He did the side jobs to save for Lucas's braces, for the field trip to the science museum, for the new shoes that fit. He did the side jobs so Lucas could have things, so Lucas could feel normal in a world where his mother had chosen to be absent. But this morning, Lucas wasn't with Michael. Lucas was supposed to be with him, but he wasn't. And as Michael stood there, watching the crowd of travelers surge past him like a human current, his chest tightened with a familiar dread. Sarah was late. She was always late, but this was different. It was 9:47 a.m. The flight had landed at 9:15. Even in a post-security haze, Sarah should have arrived by now. Michael checked his phone. No messages, no calls. His thumb hovered over her contact, then stopped. He'd learned not to reach out first. Desperation made him seem weak, and weakness meant Sarah had power. And power in Sarah's hands had never meant anything good for Michael or Lucas. Then he heard it. A small voice, high-pitched and trembling. Mister, are you okay? Michael turned. Standing beside a pillar, barely visible among the crowd of adults, was a little girl. She couldn't have been more than 6 years old. She wore a pink jacket with a unicorn, and her dark curly hair was pulled into pigtails. Her eyes were wide, wet, and terrified. She was completely alone. Michael's parental instinct flared immediately. A child, alone at that meant something had gone very wrong. He knelt down slowly, making himself smaller, less threatening. His voice became the voice he used with Lucas when Lucas woke up from nightmare. Hey there, sweetheart. Are you okay? Are you looking for someone? The girl's bottom lip quivered. She shook her head. I can't find my mom, she whispered. We were at security, and there were so many people, and I stopped to look at a store, and when I turned around, she was gone, and I kept looking, and I don't know where she went, and I'm scared. Michael felt his heart shift in his chest. He recognized that voice. He'd heard it in Lucas. On the nights after a visit with Sarah had gone wrong, when Lucas would climb into bed beside him and whisper similar fears into the darkness. He looked around. No one else seemed to notice this child. Adults rushed past with their rolling luggage, their phone call, and their destinations. The world didn't stop for a scared child. The world almost never stopped. Okay, Michael said, his voice steady and calm. You're not lost anymore. I'm going to help you find your mom. What's her name? Rebecca, the girl said. Her name is Rebecca. And what's your name, sweetheart? Emma, she said. I'm Emma. Well, Emma, my name is Michael, and I'm going to help you find Rebecca. But first, I need you to take a breath with. Can you do that? Emma nodded, and they breathed together. And something about the simple act of breathing seemed to settle the panic in her small frame. Michael took her hand. Her palm was cold, and her fingers felt impossibly small against his. He stood up, still holding her hand, and looked around the terminal. The airport was a maze, but Michael knew it. More importantly, he knew how to look for someone. He'd spent years finding solutions to problems. We're going to go to the airport information desk, and we're going to tell them about Rebecca. They have radios and computers. They'll help us find her faster than looking around. Are you ready? Emma nodded. She didn't let go of his hand. As they walked through the terminal, Emma beside him, her small fingers gripping his, Michael felt something shift in his mind. This wasn't his daughter. This wasn't his responsibility. This wasn't his problem. And yet, it was exactly all of those things. Because kindness wasn't about whether someone belonged to you. Kindness was about seeing someone and choosing to act anyway. Kindness was about understanding that everyone's child mattered. That this little girl with pigtails and a unicorn jacket mattered just as much as Lucas did. Maybe that's why he noticed something he shouldn't have noticed. Maybe that's why he looked up, just at the right moment. just as a woman in a dark blue blazer was rushing through the terminal, desperation written across her face in large, desperate letters. The woman was tall, professional, with auburn hair pulled into a neat bun. Her eyes were red from crying, and as Michael watched, time seemed to slow. Emma felt his attention shift. She looked up at him, then in the direction he was looking, and she gasped. "Mommy!" Emma cried out. She tried to run forward, but Michael held her hand gently, letting her pull him forward at a controlled pace. The woman in the blue blazer froze. Her head snapped around. Her eyes locked on Emma. The transformation was instant. The desperation became relief. The tears became overflow. She came toward them, not running but moving fast, as if she was afraid this might be an illusion that would disappear if she didn't hurry. When Rebecca reached them, she dropped to her knees and pulled Emma into her arms, holding her so tightly that Emma made a small sound of discomfort, but she didn't complain. She held on to her mother just as tightly. Rebecca was crying now, hard, the kind of tears that come when fear finally releases its grip. "Thank God," she kept saying. "Thank God, thank God, thank God." She looked up at Michael, and in her eyes he saw the kind of gratitude that changes people. "Thank you," she said. "Thank you so much. She's my life. I didn't know what I would do. I didn't know how I would survive if something happened to her. Thank you." Michael felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. He felt necessary. He felt like what he'd done mattered, not in the way his carpentry jobs mattered, where he fixed things and collected checks, but in a way that meant something deeper. He'd helped. He'd seen someone suffering, and he'd helped. But then Rebecca stood up, Emma still clutching her leg, and Michael saw the badge on her blazer. At first, he thought it was just professional insignia. Then he saw the seal, the official seal, and then he saw the words embossed in small gold letters, Judge Rebecca Morrison, District Court. Michael felt something cold slide down his spine. Judge Rebecca Morrison. That name meant something. That name had been in a sealed envelope that arrived at his apartment 3 weeks ago. That name had been on the custody modification petition that Michael had received from his lawyer. Rebecca Morrison was the judge assigned to his case, the case where Sarah was seeking full custody of Lucas, where Sarah was claiming that Michael's irregular work schedule and modest apartment were insufficient for a child's well-being, where she was trying to take his son away. Michael's mind raced through the implications. Of all the people at all the airports in all the world, he'd helped the judge who would decide the fate of his relationship with his son. The universe had a sense of irony that felt almost cruel. Rebecca composed herself, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. She looked at Michael more carefully now, as if seeing him for the first time. "I don't know how to thank you properly," she said. "What's your name?" "Michael," he said. His voice sounded strange to his own ear. "Michael Chen." She extended her. "Rebecca Morrison, and this is Emma." Michael took her hand. Her grip was firm, professional, the handshake of someone used to asserting authority. He wondered if she was studying his face, trying to remember him. He wondered if she would see something in his eyes that would make her judge him the same way she would judge him in 3 weeks when his custody case came before her courtroom. "I'm so grateful," Rebecca said. "Truly. Most people would have just walked by. Most people would have thought it wasn't their problem. But you stopped. You helped. That's rare." Michael nodded politely. He didn't tell her that he knew exactly how rare it was. He didn't tell her that Lucas had been forgotten in a Target once because Sarah had gone to the pharmacy without remembering she'd brought him. He didn't tell her about the nights he'd spent awake, worrying about every possible thing that could go wrong in a world that didn't always pay attention to the small and vulnerable. He simply said, "I'm glad I could help," and meant it, even though his stomach was churning with anxiety about what this moment might mean. Rebecca pulled out her phone. "Can I at least get your contact information? I'd like to send you something. A gift. A thank you." This was... She paused, searching for words that felt inadequate. "This was one of the most frightening moments of my life, and you helped. I can't just let that go without acknowledging." Michael hesitated. Every rational part of his brain told him to decline, to give her a fake number, to disappear from this moment, and hope that it wouldn't somehow influence her perception of him when she sat in her judge's chair 3 weeks from now. But he couldn't do it, because that would be dishonest. And if he was going to fight for custody of Lucas, he would fight as himself. Honest, imperfect, flawed, but honest. So he gave her his real phone number. He gave her his real name, and he watched her type it into her phone. "Thank you, Michael," Rebecca said. And then she took Emma's hand and walked away through the airport terminal, glancing back once to wave. Michael stood there, watching them go, feeling like he'd just thrown a match into a room full of dynamite and was now waiting to see if it would explode. He checked his watch. It was 10:03 a.m. Sarah was now 19 minutes late. Michael made a decision. He walked to the airport information desk and asked them to make an announcement. "Rebecca Chen, if you're here at gate B47, please come to the information desk. Your son is waiting." He used Sarah's maiden name, the name that was technically still valid on their divorce papers. It was a violation of their informal understanding. It was a step toward the nuclear option. But Michael was tired of waiting. He was tired of being patient. He was tired of pretending that everything was okay when everything was very much not okay. 20 minutes later, Sarah, she was beautiful in a way that had once made Michael's heart stop. She still did sometime, until she opened her mouth and the spell broke. She had blonde hair and blue eyes and a kind of careless elegance that suggested she'd never worked a day in her life, which wasn't true, but felt true because she'd always made anything look effortless, including abandonment. "Michael," she said, and her voice carried that edge of annoyance that meant she was inconvenienced. "I was only 5 minutes late. You didn't have to make me sound like a lost child." "You were 23 minutes late," Michael said, calmly. "I counted, and we need to talk about that because Lucas is at school right now wondering if his mom is still coming to pick him up today, and I had to call his teacher and apologize for not giving her a heads up that the usual Wednesday afternoon pickup might not happen." Sarah's expression hardened. "You're really going to start this now? Really? On a Wednesday morning at the airport? You're going to make this into something?" "I'm not making it into anything," Michael said. "It already is something. It's a pattern. It's been a pattern for 3 years. And I need you to understand something, Sarah. I'm going to fight the custody modification. I'm going to fight it with everything I have, because Lucas is happy, Lucas is healthy, Lucas is thriving, and I'm his father, and I'm not going to let him grow up thinking that inconsistency is acceptable in relationships, because that's what you're teaching him, that people who love you are allowed to forget you exist." Sarah's face flushed with anger. "You don't get to lecture me about being a good parent, Michael. You fix houses for a living. I have a career. I have a life. Occasionally being late isn't a crime." "No," Michael said, "it's not a crime, but it's a choice. And you choose to be late. You choose to prioritize your schedule over his. And that's something a judge is going to have to understand." He said it quietly, but there was steel in his voice. Sarah stared at him for a long moment. "Is that a threat?" she asked. "No," Michael said. "It's the truth." 3 weeks passed. Michael continued his routine. Work in the mornings, picking up Lucas from school in the afternoons, dinner together, homework, bedtime stories. The custody hearing was scheduled for 2 p.m. on Thursday. Michael wore a suit. It was brown, not expensive, but it was clean and pressed. His lawyer, a woman named Patricia Chen, who was no relation but had taken on his case at a reduced rate because she believed in it, sat beside him. Sarah sat across the room. Someone in an expensive gray suit who looked like he billed $100 an hour and had probably won custody in his sleep. The courtroom smelled like wood polish. Judge Rebecca Morrison entered from her chamber. She was wearing the full robes of her office. She looked different in person than she had at the more formal, more distant, judicial. She didn't look at Sarah. She looked at her papers, at the file in front of her, at the evidence that had been submitted by both sides. And Michael felt his heart sink. Of course she would recuse herself. She would see him and realize the conflict of interest, and there would be a new judge, probably one who had no reason to sympathize with a working-class carpenter with a modest apartment and big dreams for his son. But Rebecca didn't recuse herself. She looked up, and her eyes scanned the courtroom until they then found Michael. For just a moment, the briefest flicker of recognition passed across her face, and then it was gone, replaced by judicial professionalism. "Mr. Chen," she said. "Ms. Chen, come forward." They did. Michael stood, and his lawyer stood beside him. Sarah and her lawyer stood across from them. The court reporter was ready. The bailiff was standing by, and the case was about to begin. Rebecca looked at the custody modification petition. "Ms. Chen, you're requesting full custody. Based on Mr. Chen's financial instability and his inability to provide adequate care for his son Lucas. Is that correct?" Sarah's lawyer stood. "That's correct, Your Honor. Mr. Chen's income is sporadic. His apartment is small. He has no support system in place. And most importantly, he has no structured healthcare or educational planning for the child." Patricia Chen stood. "If I may, Your Honor, Mr. Chen's income is stable. His carpentry work is consistent and reliable. And as for the apartment, it has everything a child needs. The question isn't the size of a space, Your Honor. It's the quality of the love in that space." Rebecca listened. She asked questions. She reviewed the documentation, and Michael watched her face carefully, trying to read whether the airport moment had any impact on her perception. She didn't give anything away. She was a professional. She was a judge. She was not swayed by airport kindness or gratitude or personal connection. She was ruled by the law and by the evidence. And the law, Michael knew, often favored stability and wealth over love and dedication. Then Rebecca turned to Michael directly. "Mr. Chen, tell me about a typical day with your son." Michael stood. He'd prepared for this question. He'd rehearsed it with his lawyer. But as he stood there, looking at Judge Morrison, he decided to forget the rehearsal. he decided to tell the truth. Your Honor, Lucas's day begins at 6:30 a.m. I wake him up, and we have breakfast. Together. Usually eggs and toast. He tells me what he dreamed about. I listen carefully because those dreams matter to him, and when something matters to your kid, it matters to you. Then we get ready for school. I pack his lunch. I always pack his lunch, because the school lunch isn't great, and I want him to have something he actually likes. Today it's turkey and cheese on whole wheat with apple slices and a granola bar. Michael paused. Rebecca was watching him intently. After school, I pick him up. We go home, and he does his homework. Sometimes it's math, sometimes it's reading. We sit at the kitchen table together, and I help him figure things out. He's smart, smarter than I am, and that makes me proud and also a little scared, because I want to make sure he doesn't lose that intelligence because he's thinking about other things, like whether his mom is coming to visit, or whether his dad is going to be stressed about money. Michael felt his voice crack slightly. He cleared his throat. Then we make dinner together. He's starting to learn how to cook. Last week he made scrambled eggs on his own for the first time. He was so proud. And I was proud too, even though there was eggshell in it. Rebecca made a note. Michael continued. After dinner, we might watch a movie together, or play a game, or go outside if the weather is nice. Before bed, I always read to him, even though he's getting old enough that he could read to himself. But I read to him because it's our time, and I want him to know that no matter what happens in the world, there's always someone who will sit down and read to him and love him. And then he goes to sleep, and I usually go to the work site where I'm doing a bigger job and work until late, because I'm trying to save money for his college fund and for his braces and for all the things he deserves to have. Michael stopped. He looked at Rebecca. That's my typical day with my son, and I wouldn't change a single thing about it, except maybe I'd work less and spend more time with him. But I can't afford to do that. I can afford to be a good father, or I can afford to be a financially successful one. Your Honor, I chose to be a good father. The courtroom was silent. Sarah's lawyer started to stand, but Rebecca held up her hand. I have a few more questions for you, Mr. Chen. How often do you see your son? I mean, when Ms. Chen doesn't pick him up for Wednesday afternoons? Michael hesitated. Honestly, Your Honor, when she doesn't show up, I see him as usual. When she does show up, I only see him in the mornings before school. Those afternoons are his time with his mother, and I respect that, even though I wish I didn't have to. Has Ms. Chen missed many Wednesday visits? Rebecca asked. Patricia stood. Your Honor, I have documentation. Ms. Chen has missed 37 out of a possible 130 visits over the past 3 years. That's a no-show rate of approximately 28%. Rebecca made another note. Then she looked at Sarah. Ms. Chen, how often would you say you're able to see your son if granted full custody? Sarah's lawyer started to answer for her, but Rebecca stopped him. I'd like to hear from Ms. Chen directly. Sarah stood. She looked uncomfortable. I work very hard, she said, and I'm often busy. But I love my son, and I want to be a bigger part of his life. I think full custody would help me make that commitment. Rebecca nodded slowly. And would your work schedule be changing? Would you have more availability? Sarah's lawyer cut in before she could answer. Your Honor, Ms. Chen's career is a strong one, and it allows her to provide financial resources that would benefit the child. Rebecca looked at him directly. That wasn't my question. I asked if her schedule would be changing, if she would actually have more time for her son. Sarah's lawyer was silent. Rebecca turned back to Sarah. Ms. Chen, your schedule? Will it be changing? Sarah's answer was barely audible. No, not really. Rebecca wrote something down. Then she looked back at Michael. Mr. Chen, before we conclude, I have one final question. If I were to grant Ms. Chen full custody, and she was unable to care for Lucas for a particular day or evening, would you be available as a backup? Michael's lawyer started to speak, but Michael put up his hand gently. Yes, he said immediately. Always. I would always be available for my son, no matter the circumstance. Whether it's officially his time with his mother or not, if he needs me, I'll be there. Rebecca nodded. She set down her pen. She looked at both lawyers, then at Sarah, then back to Michael. And in her eyes, Michael saw something shift. He saw recognition. Not of Michael Chen the man, but of Michael Chen the father. A father who showed up. A father who stayed. A father who understood that love wasn't convenient and dedication wasn't optional, and that the measure of a parent wasn't the size of their bank account, but the size of their heart. I'm going to take a brief recess, Rebecca announced. I'll have my ruling when we reconvene in 20 minutes. Those 20 minutes felt like hours. Michael sat in the hallway outside the courtroom. Patricia. They didn't talk much. What was there to say? The case was presented. The evidence was heard. The judge was deliberating. They were in the hands of the judicial system now, and the judicial system could go either way. Michael thought about Lucas. He thought about what would happen if the custody was awarded to Sarah. Would Lucas understand why his father wasn't picking him up from school anymore? Would he think Michael had chosen not to be there? Would he grow up resenting his father for losing? Patricia squeezed his shoulder. You did good in there, she said. Really good. That speech about your typical day. That was powerful. That showed character. I think she heard you. She's a judge, Michael said quietly. She hears people all day long. She hears powerful stories and devastating circumstances and everything in between. What makes her different? What makes my story stand out? Because, Patricia said, it's not a story, it's a life. And when a judge sees someone actually living out their values instead of just talking, that matters. I've seen judges rule against the odds before when they see genuine commitment. Michael wanted to believe her. He wanted to believe that what he'd said and what he'd done mattered. But he'd been disappointed too many times. He'd hoped too often. He'd prayed too frequently to a God he wasn't sure was listening. 20 minutes later, they were back in the courtroom. Rebecca entered from her chambers. She looked at Michael. She looked at Sarah. And then she began to speak. This has been a difficult case to consider, she said. Both parents clearly want what they believe is best for their son. Both parents love Luke, but the court must consider not only love, but also stability, consistency, and the demonstrated commitment to putting the child's needs first. I've reviewed the evidence, I've heard the testimony, and I have reached a decision. Michael held his breath. Sarah gripped her lawyer's arm. The petition for full custody modification is denied, Rebecca said. Michael felt the words hit him like a physical force. Denied. Custody will remain with Mr. Chen, with visitation rights for Ms. Chen to be exercised on a schedule to be determined in consultation with all parties. However, I am implementing additional conditions. Rebecca looked directly at Sarah. Ms. Chen, you are required to maintain a calendar system that will be shared with Mr. Chen at least 2 weeks in advance. If you are unable to fulfill a scheduled visit, you are required to provide notice at least 48 hours in advance. Failure to do so will result in immediate review of these custody arrangements. The focus of this court is the well-being of the child, and that well-being is best served by consistency and reliability. She turned to Michael. Mr. Chen, I commend you on your commitment to your son's well-being. The court recognizes that you have made sacrifices to ensure Lucas's happiness and stability. You are to continue to encourage your son's relationship with his mother, even when that relationship has been inconsistent. That is the mark of a good father. Case adjourned. She banged the gavel, and it was over. Michael sat there for a moment, not quite believing it. Denied. The petition had been denied. He could keep his son. He had won. His hands started to shake. Patricia squeezed his hand. You did it, she said. He's yours. He stays with you. Michael nodded, unable to speak. Sarah was already leaving, her face flushed with anger and disappointment. Her lawyer was packing up his briefcase, already calculating the loss and moving on to the next case. But Michael was still sitting there, processing the miracle of words. Denied. Such a small, ordinary word. But to Michael, it sounded like the most beautiful thing he'd ever heard. As he was standing to leave, Rebecca approached him. She was out of the courtroom, in the hallway, with Emma beside her. Emma looked up at Michael with recognition. Mommy said you helped me at the airport, Emma said. You helped me find Mommy. Michael looked at Rebecca. In her eyes, he saw the meeting of 2 moments in time. The airport, the courtroom, the woman who had been terrified and grateful. The judge who had been professional and careful. They had occupied the same space in Michael's life for very different reasons, and now they were connecting. I did, Michael said to Emma, and she helped me in return, even though she didn't know it. Rebecca smiled, just barely, just enough to show that she understood. Mr. Chen, she said formally, I wanted to say something off the record. When I met you at the airport, I was the most frightened I'd ever been. My daughter was lost, and I thought the worst. And then you appeared, and you helped. Not because it was your responsibility, not because you had any obligation, but because you saw someone in pain, and you helped anyway. That's a rare quality. And today, in my courtroom, I saw that same quality reflected in how you talk about your son. He's lucky to have you. Michael felt tears building behind his eyes. Thank you, he said, for seeing that, for understanding. It's not understanding, Rebecca said. It's recognition. I recognized in you the kind of person the world needs more of. Someone who shows up. Someone who stays. Someone who knows that love isn't about what you have, but about what you give. She placed a hand on his shoulder, just for a moment. Professional, but warm. Then she stepped back. Take care of him, Mr. Chen. Lucas is a lucky boy. And then she was gone, walking down the hallway with Emma's hand in hers. And Michael was left standing there with Patricia, understanding that sometimes the universe made mistakes, and sometimes those mistakes turned into miracle. The next weeks were different. Not drastically different, but subtly transformed in a way that felt significant. Michael continued his routine with Lucas. But now there was a different quality to it. He was no longer existing in the liminal space of uncertainty. He knew that Lucas was his, legally, definitively his. It was a strange thing to know that security in a way he'd never felt it. Sarah. adhered to the calendar system for the first month. Then the visits began to decline again. By month 3, she was consistently canceling. By month 6, Lucas had stopped expecting her on Wednesday afternoons. By month 9, the visits had dwindled to occasional phone calls that Lucas took in his room, while Michael made dinner in the kitchen. Michael didn't try to push the visits. He didn't try to convince Lucas to want his mother. Instead, he simply made sure Lucas knew that his mother loved him, even if that love was expressed inconsistently and from a distance. It was a complicated lesson to teach an 8-year-old boy, but Michael did his best. Some people, he told Lucas one evening, are better at some things than other things. Your mom is very good at her job. She works hard, and she's smart, and she does important things, but she's not as good at being a mom, and that's not your fault. It's just who she is. And that's okay, because you have me, and I'm going to be so good being your dad that it makes up for it. Lucas had looked up from his homework. Does it make up for it? He asked. Will it make me not sad? Michael had wanted to lie. He'd wanted to promise that love and consistency could erase the pain of abandonment. But he'd learned long ago that lies didn't help children. They just delayed the hurt. No, Michael said gently. It won't make you not sad. Sometimes you'll still be sad, but it will mean that the sadness is just sadness, and not sadness mixed with wondering if anyone loves you. You'll know that you're loved. That's different. Lucas had nodded, and they'd gone back to homework, and Michael had quietly added another item to the mental list of sacrifices that parents required. In the spring of that year, about 4 months after the custody, Michael's phone rang. It was Rebecca Morrison. He almost didn't answer, because judges typically didn't call regular people on their personal cell phone, but something made him answer. Mr. Chen, Rebecca said, and she sounded different from when she was on the bench. She sounded like a person rather than an institution. I hope I'm not intruding. I got your number from the court records, which I probably shouldn't have done, but I wanted to reach out. Michael's heart started racing. Of course, he said. Is everything okay? Is this about the case? No, Rebecca said. Nothing like that. The case is closed, and everything regarding Lucas remains as I rule. This is personal. I wanted to tell you something that I couldn't tell you in the courtroom. Michael waited. I was having a very difficult time, Rebecca said. Before the airport, I was going through a divorce. My ex-husband had tried to pull away from Emma, had tried to use his distance as leverage in our custody negotiations, and I was angry. I was angry at him, and I was angry at the world, and I was angry at the idea that men could just choose to be absent from their children's lives and face no real consequences. I was becoming cynical. I was starting to judge every father who came before me as a potential abuser or a potential deserter. And then you stopped to help my daughter when you had no reason to. You didn't know who I was. You didn't know I could do anything for you. You simply saw a child in distress and you helped. And that act of kindness broke something open in me. Rebecca paused. When I was deciding your custody case, I realized that I needed to look at the evidence with fresh eyes. And what I saw was a man who had built his entire life around his child's well-being. I saw a man who was willing to sacrifice his own advancement, his own comfort, his own time, so that his son could have stability. And I realized that I had been judging men through the lens of my own betrayal, rather than through the lens of what the law actually required. So I want to thank you, not just for helping, but for reminding me why I became a judge in the first place. To see people clearly and judge them fairly. Michael didn't know what to say. I didn't do anything special, he said finally. I just helped. Anyone would have helped. No, Rebecca said gently. That's where you're wrong. Most people wouldn't have. Most people would have seen a lost child and assumed it wasn't their problem. Most people would have walked by, but you didn't. You were the person who saw pain and chose to act, and that makes you special, whether you believe it or not. After they hung up, Michael sat on his couch for a long time. He thought about how the universe worked. He thought about how kindness sent out into the world sometimes came back in unexpected ways. He thought about how helping a stranger at an airport had somehow helped his son maintain his family. He thought about how Judge Rebecca Morrison had been standing in the same moment of vulnerability that he'd witnessed, and how her gratitude had translated into fairness when it mattered most. Lucas came home from school that day and threw his backpack on the couch. Dad, he said, Mrs. Patterson said I did really well on my math test. She said I got a 95. Michael pulled his son into a hug. That's amazing, buddy. I'm so proud of you. She also said, Lucas continued, that I'm really good at helping other kids who don't understand the problems. She said I explained it really clearly to Tommy even though he's in a different grade. Michael felt something warm expand in his chest. His son wasn't just smart. His son was kind. His son understood that intelligence without compassion was just arrogance, and that real intelligence involved using what you knew to help other people. That makes me even prouder, Michael said, because being smart is great, but being kind is better. Never forget that. Lucas nodded, and Michael wondered if maybe, just maybe, He was raising a son who would grow up to be the kind of person who saw someone